for joining this Public Safety, Beer, and Regulated Beverages Committee special committee meeting. I'm Jennifer Gamble, chair of the committee. This is the last community conversation in a series of 3 meetings that we've held to discuss and provide input on the proposed use of license plate readers in the public right-of-way in Nashville and how they may impact public safety and privacy. This meeting is also streaming live on the Metro Nashville Network Channel 2. The public is invited to send questions or comments during the meeting to my email address, and that's at Jennifer, Jennifer, .gamble, Gamble, at nashville.gov. It has been discussed during previous meetings that the Metro Nashville Police Department is interested in using the license plate reader scanner technology as a tool for helping solve crimes, particularly for recovering stolen cars or property, as well as for amber and silver alerts. Additionally, it was discussed that there is concern within the community about how this technology could be misused to track and unfairly target our Black, Brown, and immigrant communities specifically, which have been historically targeted and discriminated against by law enforcement. Others in the community have expressed a need for the ALPRs to mitigate crime that often occurs when police are not present. So the consensus so far has been that if we allow license plate readers in the public space, there needs to be transparency and restrictions on how they are used, safeguards for how the license plate data will be accessed, shared, and stored, and accountability measures for misuse. We have a well-rounded group of subject matter experts today that will talk to us about the impact of ALPRs from the community perspective and as it relates to human rights. We will start the meeting with a presentation by Dr. Daniel Balasubramanian, research scientist, hopefully I got it right, 3rd time's a charm, with Vanderbilt University, who I like to refer to as Dr. Daniel. And he will provide an update and information about how license plate readers work. In addition, we'll hear from our panelists, Melody Fowler Green, who's the Executive Director with the Human Relations Commission, Mr. Jim Hawk, Executive Director of Neighbor to Neighbor, and 2 community members, Melissa Cherry from the Parkwood community, and Ben Tran, who's a member of the Metro Human Relations Commission and from the immigrant community. The panelists will speak in that order. Dr. Daniel will present for about 15 minutes, and we have asked our presenters to keep their comments to 5 to 10 minutes to allow at least 30 minutes for questions. So the meeting will end at approximately 7:30. Those of you watching today, please again send any questions or comments that you may have during the meeting to my email address. And again, that is Jennifer, Jennifer, .gamble, Gamble, at nashville.gov. We will do our best to ask your questions during the meeting. We will move into the question and conversation stage of the meeting after the speaker presentations. So now, without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Daniel.
Thank you. Now I will share my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
Okay. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I'm going to give a short presentation about ALPR. A few things, brief overview. I'm Daniel Balasubramanian from Vanderbilt University. 3 things in these slides. So first, just a very brief overview of how ALPR works for anyone unfamiliar. 2, previous questions and comments from Metro Council meetings. These are the past 3 meetings on the topic. And when possible, add some findings from previous literature, and then close with very brief personal thoughts. As a disclaimer, I want to reiterate, these are not meant to endorse or advocate any particular stance or position. It's trying to lay out what's happened so far, how things work, and what previous literature has found. So with that, just a quick overview of how this works. Okay, so ALPR, automated license plate recognition, is invented quite a while back, 1976. And the basic form consists of a camera used to take pictures of license plates. Okay? And these cameras can be mounted at either fixed locations or they can be on top typically of police cars. Okay? So you've got cameras and you've got computer software to turn those images into alphanumeric characters. So it does what's called OCR, optical character recognition. And then you've got computer software to compare those captured plates against a hot list typically. Okay? So that's a very basic form. Those are the essential ingredients for an ALPR system. And here's some pictures of what it might look like. It might be deployed. So there it is on a fixed location overpass or from a utility pole. The exact format of the captured data varies by system, but it can include what you see here in this picture and the following. So the plate image, an image of the plate, some contextual image, and that'll vary. So it might be some part of the car, either the front or the back, the characters of the plate, the location and GPS coordinates, time and date, ID of the camera that sent it in. There's a sample right here on the right. The amount of time that data is stored widely varies, and this is based on literature. So this figure on the right, this is a bit outdated from 2012. Okay, so this is around the DC area. Several jurisdictions that were using LPRs. One jurisdiction retained as long as 3 years, another a year, some much less. But a recent audit, that's as recent as 2020, found data retention ranged from 1 to 5 years in parts of California. And I've got links here. I'll distribute these to the council members and I'll pass them on to anyone interested, I'm sure. But this is publicly available information. I'll pull it up here. It's an audit from the state of California, a particular district, stating that it really widely varies how long data is retained in different jurisdictions. Okay, so that's just a very brief overview of how it works and some of the points. Previous questions, comments from Metro Council meetings. Okay? One, so what will it be used for? What will ALPR be used for in Metro? From Chief Drake during a previous meeting. So he stated, it'll be used for catching Amber Alerts, Silver Alerts, prison escapees, stolen cars, violent crimes, dangerous and most wanted. Where would the cameras be placed? Initially, they would be placed where people want them. The examples that were given include Haynes Park neighborhood and Antioch. Another question said, how will the council ensure that the placement of cameras is equitable, meaning that minority communities are not unfairly targeted? This is an open question that really hasn't been addressed in these meetings. That's not to say it can't be or won't be, just hasn't been addressed beyond where the initial placement would be. Who will have access to the data? That's also an open question. It could be in part determined by the pieces of proposed legislation. So some of the pieces of legislation being proposed explicitly state who has access to the data. In the existing systems, for instance, in Belle Meads, it's very restricted. And the model would probably be similar to that in most of the proposed legislation we've heard. Who will data be shared with? Again, this is an open question. It could be in part determined by the proposed legislation. Most of that proposed legislation forbids the data from being shared across agencies without warrants. Previous literature using community surveys has found some community support for sharing data. There's LPR data is currently part of open records requests, and it's been noted in previous council meetings that there might be legislation on the books to remove this as part of what's available under open records requests. That's an open issue. How will the council survey people who are opposed to this? And literature suggests random sample surveys offer a good solution. So that means sending out a survey to people in the community and getting their feedback that way. Is information shared with agencies in other jurisdictions or with ICE? That again is an open question to be decided. Under some of the proposed ordinances, that would not be shared with any other agencies or with ICE without warrants. The question came up, are there specific instances where people broke into an LPR system and tracked people? And I found one example, and it wasn't a break-in, it's in the notes. It was just accessed and someone was tracked via a public records request. So it wasn't necessarily a nefarious real-time tracking of someone's fine-grained movements, but rather an open records request that happened much later. And it was really more a proof of concept. And that's a famous one where they were making a point getting the public records request for the mayor's movements in the city. Previous comments from council meetings. So those are the questions. Here are some of the comments. People feel like the public should be made aware of all possible uses, and that this should be made into a bigger public issue. Again, random sample surveys are good, might offer a good solution here. One person said this could be used to build a case against individuals unfairly. From what we've heard and what we've read, the literature and community meetings, evidence seems to be, ALPR evidence seems to be used more often as a jumping off point to start solving a crime. That's not to say it can't be misused in other ways or to be used unfairly, but as to say the stated uses from people who have used it that have been part of these meetings, they use it as a jumping off point. When things go wrong, they too often target Black and brown minorities. Similar observations have been made in the literature, and specifically that literature is, there's a link at the end, but it's called The Judicial Response to Mass Police Surveillance. It's from 2011 by Russian. One person sees this as a debate about how we want to reimagine public safety. And that's in line with how a lot of people view this. It's kind of technology that's changing the courts, the legislature, and public perceptions about how to balance technology and privacy and security. They can and will be used to track movements. ALPR is a technology that can enable tracking, especially at mass scale. So there's valid concerns. Whether it will be abused in that way or legislatively used that way, that's a different matter. So it has the potential. There's safeguards you could put in place, legislation and policies to try to prevent abuses. From a technical standpoint, no system is hacking proof or immune to attacks. These discussions are about putting a policy in place. The literature supports putting a policy in place and also supports the idea that there's no one-size-fits-all policy that works for everyone. So as noted in the beginning slides, jurisdictions widely vary, for instance, in their policy about how long data is retained, anywhere from multiple years to 2 weeks or even less. One person wanted this to go to the community before a system is in place. I think these meetings are one way to do that, and community surveys yield trust and feedback as well. One person noted that we've heard two fundamentally different viewpoints of public safety. This might not be surprising. Previous research has suggested this lines up with previous research. So for instance, populations are often split between those willing to give up civil rights to combat terrorism and those who disagreed with such a notion. Complexity in beliefs regarding civil liberties, privacy rights, and public security was also discovered in varying levels of support for different uses of LPR. So in a nutshell, what some previous literature and surveys suggest is that the longer data is stored and the less specific the use is, the more that public trust is eroded. So the less people trust it and want it. ALPR should be subject to clear guidelines, and literature supports the idea of putting guidelines and policies in place. Importance of community engagement around the use of cameras. Again, public hearings are useful. Surveys also offer a really good form of engagement. And a couple more comments. So privacy concerns arise when data is collected at scale was the comment. That's absolutely true. And this has been noted by the courts. There's some famous court cases on this, about this, particularly pertaining to the Fourth Amendment, about whether or not mass surveillance in the form of LPR data and storing it for a long time constitutes a search under the Fourth Amendment. So some court opinions have stated that limiting the amount of time data is retained, that's part of a potential solution, but this issue is far from settled from a court or judicial perspective. Okay, so it's very much an open question. And it's a good debate and good thing to be discussing. One person said, I think we'll regret expanding the use of ALPR because we'll hurt instead of help the police who need, the people who need the most help. There's one opinion that says, there's a legal opinion that says courts might be better positioned than legislature to regulate police technologies. Again, that's an open question up for debate. But this was one council person's opinion in the past. I've listed links to the related literature. I'm not going to survey it in detail now. I've just listed it here. Most of these are publicly available, freely available links, so you can read these documents for yourself. Some slant to the pro side, some slant to the use with caution side, and some are anti. So you get a kind of a balance of many viewpoints, which is important. I'll close with just one slide of personal thoughts. So there are at least two existing models of data ownership. So one is data owned by city, state, police. Another that we're all very familiar with is a commercial use, commercial ownership of data. So Nextdoor, Facebook, Amazon, Ring. I listed Nextdoor twice. The point is, in both of these models, privacy concerns arise. Okay, so to go back and clearly define what is privacy and why do concerns arise, pretty standard definition of privacy is this: the capabilities of individuals to determine for themselves when, how, and to what extent information about them is communicated to others. Okay? So with these models, it's often difficult to determine what is being stored about you, when it's captured, who it's being passed around to, and what purpose it's being used for. Is it being used to determine that I want to buy a new blender on Amazon, or is it being used to determine something wildly different, my political preferences or my religious beliefs, things like that? People generally and often like the former. They want to have a good recommendation for a blender, but they're rightly skeptical about the second use. So our research group at Vanderbilt is studying another data model. We think it's kind of fundamentally different, which is community contributed and community owned. So you can think of Facebook and Nextdoor and for the most part Ring as community contributed, but it's not really owned by the community in any real sense of ownership. And what our goal there is to understand the social questions underlying that, such as who owns this data, and how should it be used, how long does it live, how can we ensure privacy, who should have access, who can remove data. So it might look like this. So this picture, the key difference here is maybe we have this community maintained database, okay? And it's an open question, it's a research question, which means we're looking at it trying to look at it from a bunch of different angles to see how might this third model work, where people are willing to contribute this data in the good faith that it won't be abused and misused, and it will benefit more than it hurts. And hopefully not be abused and not be used in a bad way. So with that, I'll close. I'm happy to take any questions or comments. And again, I'll send this slide deck out to Ms. Gamble and the council members so that you have the links to the related literature. So thank you.
Thank you. And yes, that would be great if you could share the presentation with me, and particularly the list of literature that you researched as well. And I will share that with the council members when I receive it. Also, Dr. Daniel, you talked about surveys, which I think is a great next step for us after having these public community meetings or conversations. I know that you are possibly working on a survey and could partner with us on that. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is that a possibility, and when that might be available?
Yeah, so we could piggyback one on top of the other. So our survey is designed to study those questions that I just looked at. So how might a third model work, a community contributed and community guided set of data to benefit communities in different ways? So I think absolutely we could piggyback those on top of each other. The previous survey that I mentioned in the research it's from about 8 to 9 years ago, and it was a survey of about 450 people in Fairfax County, Virginia, surveying specifically about ALPR and how they felt about it. Most people they found were supportive. A lot of people didn't know a lot about it. And again, the big takeaway was people liked it less and didn't want to see it when data was retained for longer periods of time, and two, when it was not clear to them how it was going to be used.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll wait until the next presenters or after all of the presentations before we take more questions. I'm sure there'll be questions for you. But thank you so much for joining us again. You've been with us through all three meetings. Really appreciate your contribution to this discussion. And just thank you. So next, we will go to Ms. Melody Fowler Green. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for participating in this discussion today. We'll just let you take the floor.
Okay. Thank you so much, Council Member Gamble and other council members and policymakers who are here with us. I just really want to applaud you all for the willingness and the leadership in listening to community concerns, in making policy decisions here in Nashville. I think that's incredibly important. I'm also very excited that Dr. Tran with the Metro Human Relations Commission is with us. And I know that he was pretty knowledgeable and will have some important things to share on behalf of the commission as well. So I will try not to take too much time, but I will impart some of the concerns that the commission laid out. We had the honor of hosting Council Member Joy Stiles in our last regular monthly meeting to talk about the bill that she had pending, proposing a pilot project for LPRs, specifically aimed at addressing issues related to drag racing. And good on her. She stuck with the commission through a whole bunch of difficult questions. And so, I just wanted to give her some props for that. But what came from our conversation was some broader concerns that I wanted to pass along. And among them are, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, we had discussions in council and in community around the use of LPRs in 2017 when the council passed an ordinance, rejecting the use of LPRs. I'm not entirely clear on what has changed in either the technology or the community's view of the value of LPRs since 2017. But a number of commission members were skeptical that there was a significant shift since 2017. And, if we think about the city's priorities with regard to public safety, Council Member Gamble and other council members will surely remember the very long evening that they had listening to community concerns during the budget process about public safety and where we are investing city dollars and public safety efforts. And to my recollection, there really were not any expressions of a desire for greater surveillance of Nashvillians, like in that conversation. And in fact, sort of opposed to that is a community call for greater use of body cams and cameras in police vehicles. And I could be wrong on this, but my understanding is we're only about 20% of MNPD actually deployed with body cams. And so when I think about building community trust and maintaining legitimacy with constituents and Nashvillians, I have real grave concerns, and the commission has grave concerns about what it is we are saying, that we are not going to completely deploy body cameras or cameras in law enforcement vehicles, but instead now we're going to shift to greater surveillance of Nashvillians themselves. And, you know, in a context where there's greater attention paid to community policing and building community rapport and trust and legitimacy, both me and my commission members really are concerned about what this signals to Nashvillians. Particularly in the context too of a tax adjustment that, as we know, a number of constituents are kind of frustrated with, right? When we look at the proposed referendum that, but for court action, may have been before Nashvillians, right? I just want us to keep our eyes on what kind of public safety and the ways in which we want community policing to show up in our community. And quite frankly, I think cameras and other forms of surveillance are antithetical to community policing and building relationships as a way of increasing public safety. I think that surveys are certainly one way of getting feedback from community, but it is in some ways an inelegant and inadequate way of sussing out community concerns, particularly from communities who are already connected, right? So you're talking about having computer access, language access, and even knowledge that the surveys are available. And, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a whole lot of social science around it. I would love to do some of that research and provide that to council members about, whether or not, surveys do adequately reflect demographically our constituents as a whole. But from my cursory reading, that is not necessarily the best way of ascertaining community feedback from communities who are not already connected. And then some commissioners expressed concerns about contracting with yet more private companies to provide public services, right? Similar to the privatization of jails and prisons and healthcare, right? Because in order to employ LPRs, we're going to have a contract with a private company who is collecting that information and maintaining that data. And then finally, from my perspective, from the commission's perspective, there was also a question about, will the neighborhoods have a say, right? The neighborhoods where we're proposing to put these cameras, how will they be engaged in whether or not they want those cameras like in their neighborhoods? And I think this is a good start, right? What we're doing now, but when the rubber hits the road, they're going to have to go somewhere, right? They're going to have to go in some location,
Right.
neighborhoods. And so the people who are in and out of those neighborhoods most consistently are going to have a real vested interest. And so how are we going to engage those communities, those particular neighborhoods? I'll yield any further time to my other panelists and be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much. And before we move on to the next presenter, I do want to say that there's no discussion about investing in the cameras today. This is just the discussion stage of how they could be useful in helping solving crimes, and if we were to use them, what kind of policies and procedures or things, safeguards can be put in place so that we aren't allowing them to be misused in ways that have been described by some of our panelists. So I do want to say that the body cameras are still a priority. Chief Drake spoke to that when he presented at our first meeting, that they are still on schedule for implementation of the body cameras, and this would not impact that in any way. And also, I agree with you as far as the community policing. I served on the communities committee for the mayor's policing commission, and that was something that was very prevalently discussed, that community policing is something that is needed and wanted, something that we want to move towards in Nashville, where community efficacy the entire community is involved in addressing crime in the community, preventing crime in community, and building those relationships that you talked about. So all of what you said is very important. It is something we have devised and developed a blueprint for Chief Drake and the police force to use in implementing a community policing policy. They've already actually had started it 3 years ago, and we'll be expanding it to all of the precincts. So I think this discussion is a part of that, but it doesn't negate that. It doesn't negate it at all. We're definitely continuing with that. But I do appreciate you bringing those issues to the forefront, because those are issues that need to be considered as we are considering lifting the ban on the use of LPRs for restrictive measures. And even when we're talking about the placement of the cameras, it has been suggested, in fact, I suggested that they not be placed in communities or neighborhoods specifically, that they be placed in order to be equitable on major roads or arteries, major streets that lead to highways, as a way to identify license plates that have already been used in a crime and have been identified as a car that is used in a crime, so that it's not surveilling every individual in Nashville and surveilling their comings and goings, but only pulling data of a specific license plate that has been identified, that has been used in a crime. So we'll talk about that, but I do, again, appreciate you today, and we'll get to Dr. Tran. Thank you as well. In fact, maybe we'll go into you, since we kind of Melody has kind of introduced you, and then we'll go into Melissa Cherry. So Melissa, if you don't mind holding on just a bit, we'll hear from Dr. Tran.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamble, and thank you for all the other council members for having me here, and for the public for giving me the time this evening. I wanted to thank Melody for her great introductory remarks and summary of the Commission's concerns. And I wanted to thank my colleague, Dr. Daniel, for summarizing some of the things that have been going on. Just a little bit about me. My research is on the history of race, going back from the colonial era to the contemporary digital age in various contexts, including the United States and in colonial Asia. So I basically wanted to raise two particular issues about license plate readers. One is that technology is not racially or culturally neutral. And unfortunately, in the United States, we are biased in our criminalization and racialization of Black and brown people. The use of this technology at the end to survey, to arrest people, does not get at the root problem of our societal issues that may be causing some of these inequities and some of these issues at hand. The second aspect that I'm very concerned about is that by the nature of big data, and specifically big data that records our movement, this data needs to be aggregated. It needs to be big for it to be effective and profitable for surveillance companies. And so this data is shared across county lines and so forth. And I'll get into this later, but it makes it very difficult for legislation, like in Metro Nashville, to control that data and legislate that data once we share it with other counties and other cities. But let me begin with the inherent racism of our policing and surveillance that is in our history and in our system. LPRs do nothing to fix this racism and criminalization of Black and brown people who are disproportionately incarcerated, disproportionately targeted, and disproportionately discriminated against. This means that LPRs will likely default to further racializing and criminalizing Black and brown people. They might exacerbate it rather than fixing or getting at any particular problem of the differential treatment of people of color. Right? We have a history of this with LPRs in other contexts. 80 local law enforcement agencies in the United States have shared LPR data with ICE to intimidate and to round up immigrant communities. LPR data has been used in New York City and in multiple cities in England, Birmingham and London, to surveil Muslims who come and go to their mosques, to follow and track them. This is an issue that is not specific only to LPRs, but to big data in general. As we were reminded with the Nashville Christmas bombing, AT&T shared personal data of private citizens with the NSA after the 9/11 bombing. So this is to say that this data is to be shared and used widely to survey private citizens, specifically targeting, at first, Black and brown and poor people, right? And this is what it means to say that Black and brown people live in the future. We get surveyed first, and everybody else gets surveyed after. This is what's happening. These cameras have to capture millions and millions of data plates, in order to signal or flag one, right? That means that you're creating a huge dragnet for all kinds of individuals, all innocent individuals, tracking, the ability to track and deduce their activities, their inclinations, and their penchants. And the ratio of the effectiveness of this hit target in cities like New York, North Carolina, has been less than 0.5% of that millions and millions of data points. So these are serious issues, right? When we think about the discriminatory targeting of Black and brown people, specifically right now as a country, our existential crisis is this. To what extent has white supremacist organizations infiltrated the ranks of our police and military? That is our question for the next 8 days for us to continue as a democracy. And this technology does nothing to address those issues. And so then now we move to this idea of this, when we talk about LPRs, we talk about, we talk about individuals who might hack in it or people who have access who abuse this, right? A jealous person who has access to this might track, their lover because they're jealous for some reason, or a politician might want to go after a journalist who's writing some bad stories. These things have happened. But the issue at hand is this inherently biased systemic problem of government agencies, companies, and law enforcement agencies right, who may be targeting groups of people who are assembling freely who happen to be people of color, okay? So for ALPR data to be effective and for government departments to use this, it has to be shared across jurisdictional boundaries, right? So to track somebody who might be drag racing in Nashville, we have to share it with people in Mount Juliet or Williamson County, or how that might happen, and then we track them. So for this to be effective, this data has to be, first of all, has to be shared. And then my first concern in this sense is, how do we legislate data that is then passed on to another jurisdiction, right? How long will it be kept? Who owns it? How will it be shared again and again and again? Who is to stop it? How is it going to merge with other hot lists? Okay? And this gets to my other issue, is that the power to create these hot lists incriminates people without warrants and without probable cause. And they're guilty until proven innocent. So for example, in the BL 2582, it endows so much power to the authorized user or the ALPR custodian who has to have supervisory approval. But who is to say that some branch of government or police department wants data for reasons deemed as reasonably suspicious that targets people of color who are assembling at their house of worship or at a protest that our government does not like? Right? These are the issues. And again, like I said, the way that this works, the way that these companies work, right, they have to share data across the board. They may sell the data or yield the data without us knowing it. And this has happened previously. And so this is the way that these data companies maximize their profits, right? So for example, council members have been in conversation with Vigilant Solutions. This company runs the National Vehicle Location Service that data that's collected from private and public plate readers into a larger digital recognition network, which is a national network of more than 550 affiliates. This is the infrastructure. This is the logic of data collection and surveillance companies. They can't function in a siloed Nashville. Our data to say we're going to record only cars in Nashville makes no sense, because we move beyond boundaries. Our boundaries are beyond that.
Right.
What I'm afraid about this is that this may result in digital redlining. You know, so somebody was saying, like, this has been very successful in Belle Meade. Well, of course it's been successful in Belle Meade. There are very few Black and brown people who live in Belle Meade. But this might make it even less people, or make people feel less comfortable going into Belle Meade that may not be wanted there.
Right.
Restricting the freedom of movement. So I want to.
So Dr. Tran, if you can wrap it up so we can get on to the next. I do appreciate
so
this.
My last issue, to bring us an example of this whole idea of drag racing, in the way that LPRs did not address the issue at hand. When we talk, drag racing has been an issue since driving has been invented. And so cities like Atlanta and LA have engaged with these groups who do the drag racing. And all they ask is for open access to space, where youth, and predominantly people who are 17 to 24 men of color, do drag racing that we're concerned about. This is a question of the lack of access of men of color to open spaces. If we go down West End from Elmington Park to Edwin Warner Park, if you look at all the open space and green fields and sports facilities that privileged populations have compared to a Nolensville or Old Hickory Road, that difference is stark. And during this pandemic, when drag racing has gotten really bad, it's because we as a society, we as leaders of the city have failed to give access to these people any outlet or access to open space.
Right, and that's a whole nother issue. I mean, I hate to cut you off here, but that's another issue that we have to deal with as policymakers. As we're looking at green space and other things that our city needs, and we can discuss that at another time. But I do appreciate you sharing your insight and feedback in regards to how it particularly impacts our Black and Brown communities. And I think that's something that's been a consistent theme, is that if this technology is used, that there has to be safeguards in place so that the technology is not used to surveil people in particular communities. Because from what I understand about the technology, it does not have face recognition. It only takes a picture of the license plate. Like what you see when you go through a toll road and you get a notice that you need to pay a toll because it has your license plate. So no one knows what race or nationality or anything about the person in the car until the license plate is actually pulled and read, and information about that individual is pulled up. So I just want to make that clear for our viewing audience and anybody watching, that it's not being proposed to use to surveil particular communities or individual faces. It is only being proposed to use at this time to take pictures of a license plate and then have that data be available if there is a crime committed and that particular license plate is deemed or pooled as a suspect in a particular crime. But I do agree that there has to be safeguards if it was going to be used. There has to be safeguards in place. So thank you again for your commentary, and thank you, Jim Hawk, for waiting. And we will have you. We will have you up next. Thank you. We can't hear you, Jim. You're on mute.
I think that is the popular phrase of 2020. I would say again, thank you, Councilmember Gamble and committee members, and also fellow panelists for allowing me to be here tonight. Let me be clear from the outset, I'm not here to advocate one position or another. That is not the role of my organization, Neighbor to Neighbor. We work with neighborhood organizations who held many different opposing positions and support them in their efforts. And so we're not here to advocate tonight, but instead we were asked here just to talk about some of the things that we are hearing from neighborhood leaders and neighborhood organizations across the city. And I think it can be summarized in one phrase. We are not all of one mind. We have a wide variety of opinions out there. And while, to my knowledge, we have no neighborhood organizations who have spoken against LCR reading as a body, we've only had a couple of them that are actually advocating for LCR readers to be installed and have actually installed their own readers. During this time right now, I am very much concerned in these conversations that people who join in these conversations, increasingly we are coming from a unilateral approach. That is to say, if you agree with me, you are the smartest person in the room, you are probably the best looking person in the room, and you're someone that I want to be with. And for those of you who are not with my opinion, you're stupid, you're ill-informed, you are evil, and you're probably ugly. And that is what we're dealing with today. And I want to just re-emphasize that for a majority of people that I have encountered on a daily basis, this isn't even on their radar, right? And most of the folks, there's a group of people who really want these readers. And there's another group who are really concerned about these readers. And so what I wanted to point out, first of all, is both of these groups can be informed and are informed, but differently informed about the issues. And so what the role of this committee really is to take those well-informed views and come up with something where we can work together as a community. And that, I think that is really important. So let me just outline a couple things about what I'm hearing. First of all, there is a large group of residents who are concerned about what's happening right now in Nashville. And they're concerned about four groupings of things. Property theft, AKA porch pirates, who are constantly taking packages off out. And while this may not seem like a big issue because we don't hear about it that much in the news and we don't hear about it that much on television, in social networking such as Nextdoor, Facebook, this is the conversation that neighbors are having. And so it is really riling up a lot of people and helping people not feel safe. And so there's a real push. We've got to do something about it. The same is true for drag racing. I don't live out in the country. I live on Shelby Avenue in East Nashville. And we have people racing, not drag racing, but really racing up and down the street. And it's a real concern for the kids, for families, for people who are out walking, for homeless folks that are out in the middle of night, wandering around. What can be done? Drugs. We have a local neighborhood organization who has installed their own cameras, and they did it because they have been fighting drugs and gangs for years, and they really feel strongly that this is a tool that they need. And then, of course, violent crime. And so we have folks on this side that are really struggling with these issues and want something to happen. And then we have good neighbors doing that. We also have good neighbors who are really struggling with privacy and are really concerned about trust. Can we trust our government to perform this function without threatening my civil rights? My own health and safety. I mean, it goes beyond just civil rights. It goes beyond, this can be for some people life and death. And we work out here in Metro Center, and there's a large number of people here who are mentally ill and who already feel like they're being surveyed even when there's no cameras around, right? And so I do want to raise, because it's been raised in neighborhood groups, that some of the folks that we're dealing with, this is just one more level of anxiety that is being put upon people, that they're being watched. So all of that to be said is there's no commonality here. I mean, there's an issue that we have two really big sides on. I'm not going to say which one's right or wrong, but what I'm going to suggest is that because of the lack of trust on all sides, I really want to urge that as this conversation really needs to continue, and that individual council members really need to bring this issue to their district. And they need to lead conversations about this issue within their district. And I would also encourage neighborhood organizations to do it. But I think it's really important to have that conversation. And then whatever policy is decided upon, it's not enough just to have a vote and have it printed in the newspaper. There is really going to need to be a significant public campaign that educates people on what the system can or cannot do. What I appreciate about tonight is we are engaging more and more people around this issue. And I really hope that as this discussion continues, that engagement will go deeper and it will go wider, so that the average person on the street who really has no idea that we've been talking about this tonight at least begins to understand that this is happening or potentially happening, and what are the issues at stake. So with that, I will yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comments today and bringing us the perspective of the neighborhood groups that you've spoken with about this. I know the Haynes Park community recently placed license plate readers in their community to deal with gangs and drugs, and they actually raised the money themselves, purchased the cameras, and is handling that as a community. So I do appreciate you bringing that perspective to us. And if you all will hold on, we will get to questions in just a little bit here. I would like to allow Melissa Cherry from the Parkwood community to speak and give us a perspective, another community member perspective. Melissa, you have the floor, and then we'll take questions in about 5 minutes after she speaks.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamble. I have to apologize that my camera's not on. I had not given WebEx access to it, and in order to do so, I had to leave and come back, and that was just too much of a risk for me.
No problem, no problem.
So you're welcome for not having a look at me. My name is Melissa Cherry. I am a lifelong Nashville resident. I'd like to first thank Councilmember Gamble for arranging these public meetings and for everyone that has spoken, particularly tonight. From what I can tell, there was not any public comment gathered during the Metro Council meetings where these bills were heard, nor was any public discussion scheduled prior to any of these bills being presented to Council. Even though in 2017, like Mel Fowler-Green noted, Metro Council did ban invasive fixed position license plate readers and required public hearings for any expansion of such technology. So I appreciate these hearings happening. I'm not sure that particularly follows what 2017 Council expected, but I'm glad we're here now. What we must acknowledge in this process, I think, and in these discussions, is the stark difference between the speed and caution that our city has proceeded with when public requests for reform are presented versus similarly impactful requests that may emanate from within Metro institutions, particularly when MMPD is involved. What I see, sadly, is reflective of the same top-down approach that serves to erode public trust, to minimize the needs and concerns of the community, to allow for private funding of law enforcement technology expansion, and to eliminate public discourse. I question the swift movement to purchase and install surveillance-style technology when it took the department extraordinary lengths of time and concerted public advocacy in the past for even incremental change within MMPD. When the community brought concerns over policing in 2016, they were deemed radical disruptors. When those claims were backed by academic study, MMPD deemed them disingenuous. When the community demanded that MMPD fire an officer that shot a man in the back, they refused to even meet with the mother of the victim. When the community demanded that MMPD adopt body cameras, they were dismissed for years, only to be given false security that they would be funded in 2017. MMPD controlled the process such that the cost and data storage decisions made the prospect seem impossible. We are still today waiting for full deployment of body cameras. When the community demanded a community oversight of the police, Metro Council prevented a public hearing on the matter and deferred the will of the people indefinitely. When the community came together to petition and to campaign for community oversight, the FOP countered with a $500,000 campaign to prevent it, in conjunction with at least one of the current bill sponsors for license plate readers who acted as their spokesperson in community meetings. Additionally, when community meetings were allowed and public input was considered, technology similar to this was overwhelmingly refused in the form of the flawed spot shutter technology that was proposed under Megan Barry's administration. I've watched the prior two meetings as well, and I've appreciated the efforts that some council members have made to investigate the impact, intended and otherwise, of the adoption of fixed license plate readers. Councilmember Sepulveda and Councilmember Rosenberg's testimonies brought together the data-backed privacy concerns and the trauma-informed daily impact of increased data collection by law enforcement in public spaces. We heard concerns from Jill Fitchard about the lack of public input prior to the introduction of these bills. We heard our public defender's office with Martisha Johnson asserting that the legitimate risks of data collection expansion far outweigh the benefits that the courts might see. To me personally, the fact that Community Oversight Board was not involved in drafting any of the current legislation is just further insult to injury for the department. The fact that an outside research firm was hired instead of our own research analyst that we already pay for bothers me personally as a Nashville resident. And on the other hand, the testimonies of the bill sponsors and the DA's office, and even the presumably neutral researcher, which I appreciate all of his work, replaced answers that were specific with general answers. They minimized valid concerns instead of accounting for them. And I appreciate Dr. Balasubramanian laying out the questions earlier tonight because they are similar questions that I still have. We have no answers about where exactly the readers would be placed. We have no answers about who would monitor them in real time. We have no answers about what exactly would trigger their use or their access by anyone. Must a license plate number be entered into the system to match the location of a car? Or can a license plate number be pulled from any particular reader based on the time and location? I don't know the answer to that. It doesn't mean that nobody here knows those answers, but they have not been presented or delivered in response to any of the questions that were posed here. The chief of police stated that license plate readers are needed because of an increase in crime. However, he failed to report that crime had actually been decreasing up until COVID-19, with severe hardship and loss of incomes, including job layoffs, reduction of hours and wages, evictions, and general economic decline that would presumably result in an increase in crime. The DA also brought up recent high-profile murder that happened on the interstate, but made no connection about how these readers could have been used to prevent that murder or to solve it. Raising issues without connecting that process to license plate readers results in nothing more than an appearance of fear-mongering. But more importantly, what I've not heard discussed here is the highly unusual and particularly problematic way in which these devices would be funded. I have heard no discussion here whatsoever about funding. Luckily, one of the articles that I read mentioned that funding would be covered by a nonprofit called A Safer Nashville. I'm alarmed at the idea of a privately funded technology being deployed, period, much less in such an obscure way. I would like to understand whether this has ever happened in the past and whether Metro Council as an entity has any rules around this as an accepted practice. My efforts to uncover the mission and funding source of the named nonprofit was even more concerning. I can find no record of the nonprofit on any site that provides financial accountability for charities. Fortunately, I was able to reach out to someone that had been lobbied by them and was able to find out that they just formed in October by wealthy Nashvillians with a mission to, quote, support law enforcement. Among their activities, high-ticket fundraising events that preclude interest of poor people, messages decrying the lack of resources being funneled to MMPD, who in fact received a measurable increase in their budget this year, despite the historical effort by local voters to reroute that money to education and social services. I could continue on that, but suffice to say that this is a dangerous precedent, both taking money from private interests and the lack of transparency that has us discussing this bill over a month without this issue even being raised. And no upfront disclosure from the bill sponsors about how involved MMPD or any various council members were in raising this money. As we know, hardware is but one aspect of the cost of any technology. As I mentioned before, MMPD successfully stalled mostly free body camera implementation on the concerns of data storage and security. But again, we've had zero discussion on 3 separate bills that would require training, storage, and security of this publicly collected data. On the other hand, a family or individual has never been allowed to pay individually for rape kit testing, DNA testing, or any other technology that they desire that might absolve their loved ones of crimes or solve crimes that have been committed against them.
Okay.
In closing, the desires of a few well-funded advocates should never outweigh the safety of large swaths of our population. Private funding from special interests should never replace financial management, fiscal responsibility, or the use of public funds for public goods. To prevent transparency in the funding of law enforcement technology that's been shown over and over to put the poor and disenfranchised in a position of vulnerability. Metro Council has yet another opportunity to rise above the MMP mantra of just trust us and get to the hard work of how can we be more trustworthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, for your comments and your well-researched recap of what has happened in the past. And full transparency, there's not been any discussion about the cost of the cameras, because these meetings are not to discuss any specific bill or purchase of the cameras. These meetings have been just to get the conversation in the public so that people can become aware of the technology and the proposed use of it, but not specific to any particular legislation that is tracking in the council right now. So I do want to make that clear for everyone watching, but I do really appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully, Melissa, you'll stay on because we are going to move into the question and conversation phase of this meeting. And I saw Councilman Rosenberg's hand first, and then Councilman Cash, and Councilwoman Vercher. So we'll go in that order: Rosenberg, Cash, Vercher. And you all have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for this, and appreciate all the panelists tonight. We've heard some really great voices and some powerful testimony. I think it's important to acknowledge that we as a council, the greatest impact that we're going to have, and really, of course, the most important element of this is on the front end, and whether or not we're going to create an ordinance allowing these LPRs to proliferate in Davidson County, because once they are, we have very little control. We'll have limited say in what the contracts look like. We have no say whatsoever in what happens with public records requests. That's a state law. We have no say in who ends up on these hot lists, like Dr. Tran said. We have little to protect us from bad actors. We'll be exposed to warrants from higher levels of government that they're able to obtain, and a myriad of other issues. We already have an ordinance that allows mobile LPRs, and until we have policies governing their use and data on how they're used, I simply don't understand why we'd want to open the floodgates. We already have an avenue for evaluating these, and we should see what the mobile ones already allowed look like under carefully crafted guidelines, and be very, very intentional about our evaluation before we consider any sort of expansion. And I really hope we do take that route. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Cash.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two kind of questions, or I guess part observation, part question. And I guess I want to be corrected if my understanding is incorrect. And I asked Director Cooper some of this, but I don't think I got to the ultimate question I can ask here. So the 2017 law that we've referred to a lot has a number of sections to it, and it does two main things, is my understanding. In Section 1C, it sets up a process if we want to expand surveillance technology in Davidson County. And in that definition for 1C, license plate readers are included in the definition of surveillance technology. So 1C sets up a process to possibly expand with a public hearing and a council resolution to expand license plate readers. However, later in the bill in Section 1G, license plate readers are disallowed in the public right-of-way, which kind of goes back and amends what was stated in 1C. Some of the legislation that has been moving through, and we've kind of put on hold as we've had, so that we could have these meetings and learn more, do amend Section 1G about license plate readers. And so it's my understanding that if 1G is amended to expand the use of license plate readers, especially within the right-of-way where 1G eliminates it, that section 1C, which still allows for a public hearing anytime we're going to expand license plate readers, is still part of the law, and that a resolution would have to go through council. So there has been some concern about community tonight and in other meetings about community notification and community discussion. So I think, and not that the way that it's worded in 1C is perfect going forward, but there already is a public notification system and a chance for people to weigh in. I don't know that it's geographic in nature as much as how much we're going to increase the use of those technologies. But I do we've kind of been focusing a lot on 1G when it comes to the 2017 law, but 1C still, a major part of that bill sets up a process, and that process can include, if 1G is amended, that process can include license plate readers for public hearings and council resolutions, which will require public notification. If I could, just kind of one more, so I guess my question is, do I understand that correctly? That if 1G is amended by any legislation, that 1C still allows for public notification through a resolution and public input through a public hearing?
Mr. Cooper?
Well, it depends on how 1G is amended. I agree that if it is amended to allow the technology, you still have 1C that includes license plate readers as part of that. I kind of wish it didn't, because that you do have that kind of built-in inconsistency. But under the rules of statutory construction, if there is a provision in an ordinance that is specific to a particular thing, which we have in G, that's going to prevail over anything in C, because you have a specific prohibition for this technology. So if right. Then potentially C could come into play with the public hearing. But C is broader than just license plate readers. It's for any right. surveillance technology.
But it does include license plate readers. Correct?
It specifically includes, yes.
All right. Thank you. My kind of second question, I don't want to take too much time, but if I could ask Dr. Daniel, he presented a third kind of option in his presentation. Is he still with us?
Yes.
Thank you. He kind of presented a third option, and that was kind of where communities own the data and own there were two parts to it. So, like, we've debated a lot, and we're going to continue, and a lot of these bills have to do with the public use of license plate readers or government use of license plate readers. We also have had a bill that was amended, but this didn't happen, but we have another one before us that would kind of take away the use of license plate readers by private citizens on their property, right? And so I guess my question is, when you were talking about that community ownership of the data and of the process, did that envision allowing private individuals to have license plate readers on their property? Not that they would have to, but that private citizens would have access to that technology and could work with police to help prevent and solve crimes.
Yeah, so to answer your question, yes. So this model we're looking at, this is part of a research project and an open question that we'd like to explore that we think makes sense for whatever reason and based on a lot of empirical evidence. I think you found, if you're familiar with Nextdoor at all, neighborhoods and communities, people are willing oftentimes to share data and team together, pull together to find things. I mean, whether it's a lost pet, a hurt dog, a hurt bird, or people who broke into cars or people who stole cars. You'll see posts almost multiple times a week in the Nations and Sylvan Park saying, does anybody have ring data of 46th Avenue around this time, my car was broken into or my car was stolen. I'm just trying to get some video footage or a license plate or something. And so I think the model we're looking at is how can we facilitate aggregating some of that data in a way that helps people without eroding personal rights. You take a snapshot of one LPR, one license plate, and I drove by the Target on White Ridge Road. That's okay. If you have hundreds of locations of me stored over a long period of time, that's a little more concerning. So how can we build something that's somewhere in the middle of that, that meets the public good, meets these needs that people want and are often very willing to contribute willingly, and they'll even go the extra mile times.
Is there any reason, I mean, like when private citizens or private Nashvillians have those license plate readers, they don't have access to the personal data of who owns that license plate, I would assume, but I guess I want to ask, in your research, have you found that data, the access to who's behind that license plate PR549 is abused? Are police giving that data out in ways that they shouldn't?
So
does that make sense?
I think I understand the vein of your question. So I emailed to Councilperson Gamble just a little while ago. There's that list of references, and there's an audit from California last year that cites, you can read it, I just had it pulled up on my screen. It says 3 agencies have agreed to share their images widely with little knowledge of the receiving entity's rights or needs to access the images. So there's at least one case where it appears that they're a little, at best, they're loose with the data and who they're sharing it with.
I'm not asking about the license plate data as much as our people who own the cameras privately getting access to who is behind that, like the names and addresses of the people.
I haven't found any instances of that. That's protected information. I think you need a legal expert, but I believe that would be that's protected.
Right. Okay.
If I may.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
I think he's answered the question in regard
Not correctly, though.
Okay, Councilman Rosenberg, do you have a correction?
I'm sorry. First of all, on a small scale, the HOAs often have to ask their residents for their license plate numbers so that they can match residents within their HOAs. On a much larger scale, Vigilant, which is one of the companies interested in Nashville's business, shared 5 billion data points from their license plate readers with ICE, who obviously has the access to who those license plates belong to, and those were used to target immigrants. So yes, this data has been matched to their owners and abused in really serious ways. Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you for that clarification.
This is Mel. Can I also add to Council Member Rosenberg's point that I don't believe that there's anything that these private companies, to the extent that they hold that data, I don't see what would protect them from subpoenas from law enforcement agencies. So even if we, let's say, in our policymaking, in our local legislation, were to write in protections, that would not prevent the disclosure of the information by subpoena to the third party.
Thank you. I believe it was Vercher, Councilmember Vercher. Are you taking your hand down? Are you still there, Councilmember Vercher?
Yeah, I don't have a comment.
Okay. Councilmember Stiles.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so very much for hosting another one of these events, and thank you to all of our guests. I did want to address Jim Hawk and say thank you for your comments in regards to having these conversations and having viewpoints that it does not have to be combative, that there is a way for us to all work together and figure out what the solution to the problems that we're trying to address with this equipment can be. And what's important is that we can disagree agreeably. So thank you for putting that position out here. And then to Ms. Cherry, in regards to my previous bill, in the pilot program that was only going to be for 6 months, that is what was going to be addressed regarding Safe of Nashville, not for paying, having a private company pay for the entire city just on its own, but to do a pilot so that we can do the investigative work regarding this equipment, how the audits can actually be followed. One of the things that I was trying to put in an amendment was to have 2 representatives from the council and a member from the Community Oversight Board to be able to look at audits in real time and see how the equipment was being used, and to see how there are fail-safes put into the system so you cannot surveil or track people. These cameras actually only take pictures of your license plates. And I do understand, for those people that are concerned, what has happened in other cities with this equipment. I think the goal of these conversations is to figure out, how does Nashville get it right? Not to make the same mistakes as other cities, but to learn from others. So that is certainly the intention. And I hope that as we move forward, also to Jim Hawk's point, that we do continue to so we can get closer to a point of really presenting legislation that's ready to move forward. And I think it's clear, even from tonight's conversation, that we are not that much closer. So there's work to be done, but I do believe that it can be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I'd like to remind the viewing audience and the attendees, please submit your questions and comments to my email address, jennifer.gamble, Gamble, @nashville.gov. I see a couple of hands raised in the attendee section that you're not able to speak live, or you're not able to speak. So if you would please submit your questions through the email address, I will ask them during the course of this meeting. So just wanted to remind you all of that. I've been taking the hands of council members that have raised their hands, and we have in this order Toombs, Sepulveda, and Nash. Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for hosting this discussion. I've been listening to the comments from the different speakers and comments from all of the sessions, and I hear a lot when you're talking about surveillance and giving more, I guess, authority to law enforcement. There's always a discussion of the disproportionate impact on Black and Brown people, and I absolutely agree. We all know that the criminal justice system has had a disproportionately negative impact on Black and Brown communities. However, I feel like I need to say something as the council person for District 2, which is a majority African American district, is over 70% African American. And the feedback that I get from the vast majority of my constituents is in favor of LPRs. A lot of my constituents are longtime Nashville residents. They've been in their neighborhoods a long time. They have concerns about drag racing. They have concerns about excessive speeding. They have concerns about crime. And they feel as if they were in more affluent, more white neighborhoods, that they would get more patrols, that they would get better assistance. And so I feel like that needs to be said, because there's always, again, the conversation about the disproportionate impact on Black and Brown people. And there's plenty of evidence and research to support that. But I will say that on behalf of my residents, overwhelmingly, they're wanting LPRs, or, I have Ring at my house, and so a lot of folks in my neighborhood do, so there's a lot of sharing of data. There's a Facebook page for my neighborhood. There's a lot of sharing of Ring data and other security systems that folks have. We even had because there was someone who was going through the neighborhood checking mailbox. We had a neighbor go out with her phone to video the person. So there isn't a lot of concern, at least in my area of town, about being overly surveilled. People feel like they're not being helped enough by law enforcement because they're Black. So I think that their perspective needs to be accounted for in the conversation. Obviously, you know, it's not the intent of any council person to negatively impact an entire community. But I think that we need to have, keep in mind that there is a variety of opinions in the African American community. And so we need to take that into account and not just look at it from one vantage point.
Thank you, Councilmember Toombs. We have not heard that perspective in this discussion. I appreciate you bringing that up. Councilmember Sepulveda.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for continuing to host these meetings. I think I've already spoken on the issue with the LPRs and the ICE component, and I think Councilman Rosenberg just restated just how likely this is in the realm of possibilities, since one of the companies that wants to do business with us did share that data with ICE. And Councilwoman Toombs is absolutely correct that there are so many different viewpoints, even within one community. For my personal experience in my district, which has the largest Latino population out of all the council districts and has a huge number of immigrants, what I have heard from that community is that they don't want this, since there is the possibility of, it being used by ICE agents. There are other people in my district who do want this. So there is varying, want and need for this type of system. But I guess my question, Chair, I wanted to ask something that I didn't get the chance to at the last meeting. In which a council member stated that they were working with state legislators to try and change the current state law to exclude Nashville from being looped into the open records. And I just wanted to know which state legislators where we're talking about that, just based on personal experience. I've never known many state legislators to be willing to help out Nashville. I could always count on them to want to preempt us. So I was just curious about that, Chair. Thank you.
I do not remember who made that comment. Is the council member on the call, and would you like to address that, whoever that person was?
Hi, Council Lady Gamble. This is Council Lady Johnston.
Okay.
Yeah, the person specifically that I've been talking to is Representative Jason Powell. He's actually done this before, as far as like line iteming out a certain set of data that's no longer for open records. So he's a good person to reach out to. There's other people that are reaching out to others, but I can't speak to that because I have not. But I have spoken with Jason Powell, so I guess that's part of the answer. I mean, there's others that are working, but and there's others that are inquiring as well. So.
Madam Chairman, I think there needs to be a correction too. I have spoken with Representative Powell. He's having people in the legislature look at this. It's very early in the session yet, but it's not just for Nashville. This would preclude all LPR data from being part of the Open Records Act, so that ICE could not make a Open Records Act request from any given department, or the wife that's wanting to find out where her husband's been can't go up and get a Open Records Act information.
Thank you, council members. I guess it still wouldn't exclude ICE from requesting a subpoena for that data.
Correct. Can I speak to that?
Yes.
Okay, because I know that is a concern, and it was a concern of mine, and I actually asked about possibly putting that into the policy of we're not going to share with ICE, but that I was told very quickly that would be sort of a sanctuary policy that would put in jeopardy state and federal funding. So that was why that was out. But then I really kind of wondered, is LPR data something that ICE is even interested in? Because if you are looking for immigration violations, someone that is undocumented doesn't have a car in their name. And so then it's just really not the best tool for them. There's other tools, I guess, but LPRs is not the best one. And then I went so far as to reach out. I didn't reach out to Belmead Police Department because I don't think they have that issue, but Shelby County, I would think, does have a population that with immigrants, documented and undocumented. And they said the entire time that they have had this technology, which is over 2 years now, they've not had one inquiry from ICE. So the other thing as far as Nashville goes is that Executive Order number 8 that Mayor Cooper put into effect is, states that anytime we have any type of contact with ICE, that has to be reported to the Office of New Americans. And so that's all. It would be in the audit trail, the 582 outlines as far as who's accessing what and why. It would be in our own database or audit trail, but it also would be reported to Office of New Americans. But I'm going to start asking that question of municipalities that are using this: is how often is ICE even trying to get this data? But the first one that I got, and granted I'm not as prepared, but Shelby County, Memphis, 0 times, which I found to be interesting and helpful and reassuring. So I hope that's helpful. Yep.
Thank you. And to follow up on that, with Director Cooper, if there was a policy in the legislation or something stated, a section in the legislation that stated that the technology would only be used for Amber Alerts, stolen property, solving violent crimes, would that exclude any sharing of data with ICE? Could that exclude any sharing of data for immigration purposes?
Well, since the information is public record, if they made a public records request, absent a change in state law that's being discussed, then there would be no way to prohibit. Any Tennessee citizen can obtain that information through a request.
Madam Chair, can I just follow up?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilwoman Jost, for your thought process with this. I know about the mayor's executive order. I was on the immigration task force with Councilwoman Suara that made several of these suggestions. Even though it hasn't been shared, maybe in the Belmead area, there's data that proves that ICE will use this. There's absolutely data. They have requested this. They have signed contracts with companies. So I don't want us to forget that now that we are talking about this out in the open, that it could absolutely be on their thought process at this point. Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that point up. We've got about 10 more minutes before we need to conclude, so we're going to go to Councilman Nash. You had your hand raised. You have a question or comment?
Well, I just want to clarify some issues that were raised about how we even got started down this road. It was not nefarious, and actually it was community driven. When Council Rosenberg proposed the initial amendments to this law, we started hearing from several neighborhood groups that say, wait a minute, we've got these cameras, our community's paid for them, we don't want to have that ability taken away from us. And so we began the discussions that way. Nothing nefarious about it. There was nothing to rush to judgment, but in that discussion. And then we also said, well, the police department might be interested in this technology, and sure enough, that came about. Secondly, Mr. McIver, the businessman in South Nashville, he had a traffic accident outside of a new apartment complex that he was a part of, and a man was killed. And there was so much racing up and down Bell Road, he became concerned. So we tried to get some of the business people and community groups together there. And he's the one who started Safer Nashville. We have groups all the time. You see it more in parks where you have the Friends of Centennial Park, and they'll grant the park some money. But that all has to be approved through council. And then the third part is you haven't heard about where we're going to put cameras and the like, because none of those have been proposed yet. This is just trying to set up some policy in case some department, whether it be Public Works or the police department or health department, find some use for license plate readers. And again, all of those will have to come back before the council for approval, hearings, I'm sure, depending on how big the scope is. And also, Council Rosenberg makes a good point in that potentially the new cameras in the cars that are being rolled out have the ability, if we buy the software, to be license plate readers. And I suspect, just because of the finances the way they are, that's probably the first use of any LPRs if in fact we go that direction. There's this sense that all of a sudden there's going to be 100 cameras popping up, and not the first one has even been funded yet. So I think we're maybe jumping ahead more than we need to.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Sarara, and I see Councilmember Johnston. Is your hand raised from earlier, or is that a new question?
It's a new.
Okay. So we'll have Sarara and then Johnston, and then we'll have a wrap up after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo what everyone has said. Thank you for hosting this conversation. In the first meeting, I did talk about the reason why I don't support LPRs, and a lot of that factors were mentioned by some of your panelists today. In the same token, we've also heard so many people also speak to the other side of things. I guess Councilmember Stiles, Mr. Ork is popular tonight. What I want to say without rehashing why I support or don't support it in this case is that I think there is still a need for more conversations. I look at the sessions that we're having. It's the council member that can speak and the panelists. You have a lot of people in the community that cannot give their opinion in these meetings here. And so there's still need for council members to go back into the community. There's still need for the community to have a major input. And we need to make sure we do that. I don't want us to rush this. There's so many unintended consequences. If we don't get the policy, the procedures right, there are a lot of people whose rights will be violated. And I will speak as a Black, brown person that, yes, my community have a tendency to be profiled, to be surveyed, and all of that. And we've had reports of Black, we've had all kinds of things that shows that this type of data could be used if not protected well. So all I'm saying is that let's not rush into it. Let's make sure we have our data right. Let's make sure we have the community input. What Councilmember Toombs shared tonight is an insightful one, which I've never heard before. And it gave me pause, but that does not negate what I've heard as well. And so let's make sure we do this right. Let's not rush into things, and let's get more community input. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you so much. So one of the calls that I get, multiple calls every week, and especially from my district is very different from one end to the other. But my community that's the most diverse community, which is Paragon Mills, I get calls from there wanting more patrols, every single week, multiple times a week. And one of the things that I learned as I've obviously gotten more involved in the community, and I've met with different nationalities and the different religions, and is that the immigrant population, of which I have a decent amount, the immigrant population is victimized more often than not, and it's because they know that these criminals know that they're not going to call the police because they're afraid of that, and so that makes me sick to my stomach that I've got people in my district that are afraid to call the police for protection because they're just as afraid of deportation or whatever that they're afraid of, and so they're victimized because of that. So this would help that. I've got people of all colors and races and religions that are afraid for their kids to sit out to play in the front yard, to sit on the front porch because they've got drug deals going on very blatantly. They've got drive-by shootings. I see this along the same lines as that Council Lady Toombs has said, is that they want protection. They want to feel safe. We're not going to have more police officers or at least enough to handle our growing population, maybe in my lifetime. And so we're going to have to look at ways to utilize technology to fill in the gap there. And what I like about technology is that it doesn't have racial or ethnic bias. This technology rules out more suspects than it implicates. And again, the crime deterrent, it's one thing to solve crimes. It's a whole nother thing to actually prevent the crime from happening because those criminals are seeing that there's a camera there. So they're going to go elsewhere. I'm really passionate about this because I want to make my community safer for every person, for documented, undocumented, for Muslim, for Christian, for everyone. And I think there's a way for us to do this to allow for this technology to be utilized, all while creating a very robust framework for privacy and reporting and auditing procedures. And so I'm looking forward to everyone's feedback on how we can do this and really make a marked difference in the public safety of Nashvillians. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're gonna wrap it up just a moment here. I didn't get any or receive any questions from the public. I did receive a couple of comments, and most of those comments are referred to the data collection or the concerns about the data collection, how it's stored, how it's accessed. So that is something that feedback that we're getting from the public that needs to be considered when we're continuing this discussion about the license plate readers, is that some people are very concerned about the data collection and their privacy and how that data will be used and stored. And I see your hand, Melody. Did you have another comment?
Yes, very quick. And I just think it's going to be important to, hearing what Councilmember Johnson just said, to connect the dots on how LPRs are actually going to address those public safety concerns that she raised. I think that's what the community that I hear from are looking for. I think that those public safety concerns are very real, but how do you connect the dots to LPR is sort of the trick. And I think that for many, they're not convinced yet that LPRs actually do address those legitimate public safety concerns.
Great. Yes. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for attending and contributing to the conversation today. I'm not sure, when the next meeting will be as far as from the Public Safety Committee. However, I think it is a great idea, as it was suggested by Jim Hawk, that council members go into their communities, have their own individual discussions with their communities, where the community can actually engage and comment on how they feel about the license plate readers. I think the discussion needs to continue. I think, as it was stated by Councilmember Sorora, hopefully we will slow down and get more input and vet this in the same way that we did the body cameras and other public safety initiatives that we've embarked in recently. So with that, we will close. Thank you all for joining. Good night.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.